I did want to protect my domain name, my literal domain name. There's a great musician out of Austin, Texas, who's also named Matt Ragland, that anytime he says, like, he has music, people find me. And there's probably a lot. I would like to think at some point people email him asking about productivity or email marketing advice. And he's like, no. It's like people ask me, like, hey, where's your tour? I was like, well, I'm like, just kidding. You're looking for this Matt Ragland.
Yo. Welcome to Find Your Freedom, the best entrepreneurship podcast. Being an entrepreneur is hard. That's why we created findyourfreedompod.com to compile all the resources you need to find your own freedom. Our guest today is Matt Ragland, and this guy is a specialist in productivity and getting shit done. I personally have utilized some of his tools, and I think you are going to get a ton of insight and inspiration from this episode. Welcome, Matt. We're super stoked to have you on with us today.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Doug. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Matt, I want to get right into it. And it seems like every week now that more and more people are hearing about the podcast, I'm having someone reach out to me or stop me and say, I have this idea that I want to start up, or I'm in this job that I don't like, but I want to do something else, but I just can't get myself to do it. Why is it so hard for people to get started on these things or to start it and really stay with it?
Most of the time, the reason is people are thinking too big, too soon about what they have to do to achieve that goal. And there's nothing wrong with thinking big. In fact, pretty solid, a little old timey, but a really solid book to read is called The Magic of Thinking Big. So I think you should think big, but have like macro vision with micro actions. And when I say that, it's thinking about what is literally the one or two things that you can do today that are going to move you forward in the direction of your vision of that big goal that you have. And the follow-up from that is like, okay, if I can convince you to do just one thing, then the follow-up is prioritizing and deciding which of those many little things that you have to do is the right one to do today or this week.
That's why it's so overwhelming.
Right. That's why it's so overwhelming. Obviously, there's a lot to do. But what I always say is if you can think of really any one thing to do, then that's probably the first or next thing that you should do. Don't overwhelm yourself thinking about there are 10 things that I have to do, which is the absolute best tip top number one priority to do right now. You're much better off just making incremental progress on those little things that you know are on the list of things to do. And then as you get better, this happens in every like walk of life, anything that you want to do. But as you get better, you just start to understand more of what the priorities are. And that way in the future, when you're like, okay, I have 5 things to do. I've been doing stuff like this for a year now. Now I know that, problem A or task B is the best one to do first.
So a little bit of trial and error.
Yeah, definitely.
So is the systems that you typically, so after watching, by the way, everyone needs to go check out Matt's YouTube page. It has like so many like really clear, concise videos on just like how to break down a bunch of these different, because you recommend a lot of different processes. I think you kind of make it so that everyone can find their own exact niche on what fits best for them. Is that kind of your mentality? Maybe you can expand a little bit more on what exactly you do and why you are so huge on Twitter and YouTube.
Yeah, thanks for saying that about the YouTube channel. It is a labor of love for me, certainly. And when you go to the channel, what I would look for first are the goal setting frameworks. So I have probably my most popular and effective one right now is the GAP method. And what the GAP method is doing is giving you a framework to think about and GAP stands for goals, actions, and protection. And it's really, in a nutshell, the combination of 3 different productivity strategies. And the very first one is when you look at it and say, what is the goal that I have for this week? And I really like planning in the span of a week. It's very normal. And you may think, going back to the bigger goal, the thing that I want to do is going to take more than a week to do. Well, that's probably true if you want to do anything big. But what I like doing at that point is breaking down and saying like, okay, if there's a big goal that might take me 3 months or 6 months, what are kind of the week-ish long like sub goals that I can break it down to? And then I'm looking at that. So that's the goal section. So every week I'm thinking, what is my goal for this week? Even better if I can then connect that goal to the bigger goal that I have for the quarter, the half year, the year. The A stands for actions. So then I'm approaching that goal and saying like, what are the individual actions or tasks that I have to complete in order to like achieve or complete that goal that I have set for this week? And at this point, like I'm thinking about how can I stack these winning weeks together? Because if I have 5, 6, 10 sub goals to like my big quarterly goal, that's something I call the OMGD framework for bigger goals. We can talk about that as well, because I don't think I actually have a video about that right now. It's kind of it's in the script. It's in the script phase.
It sounds similar to the BHAG for those that are familiar with that one.
Yeah, it's a lot like that. Yeah. And so we have goals, we have actions, and then the P for protection. That is looking at it and saying, okay, if I know this is the goal that I have for this week, and I know that in order to achieve this goal, I have to complete these actions, when am I going to protect time during the week to complete these actions so that I can achieve my goal? So we're working like, kind of backwards and forwards to say like, again, here's my goal, here are the actions I need to complete, here's the time that I need to protect. You can also kind of work backwards on this to say, well, I only have an hour this week that I can dedicate to this goal. Yeah, Jonathan, before we started recording, you were telling me that you run a nonprofit and you have 2 small kids. I've got 3 kids myself. I'm running a business. One of the reasons, don't tell anyone, but one of the reasons that I kind of slowed down on YouTube over the past year was because from a priority perspective and from a time perspective, I didn't have 10 hours a week to spend on YouTube anymore. I had maybe 2. And that realization and that honesty that eventually, after much weeping and gnashing of teeth, I was able to have that self-awareness about. I was like, should I have kept doing some kind of video in the 2 hours a week that I had? Perhaps. We'll come back to that another time, I'm sure. But it was understanding I only have 2 hours. So if I only have 2 hours, I shifted that time away from YouTube and into my newsletter. So I was able to stay consistent on my newsletter because that's about 2 hours that I can go from blank page to completed newsletter each week. And I know that will work for me. So
nice.
That's kind of the breakdown of, looking at it and saying, what is the time? And another thing that I talk about a lot on the channel is time tracking and time blocking, calendar blocking. And it's a bigger understanding of the time that I have available for anything that I want to do.
Right. That makes sense.
And time tracking sounds like really, when you say it, when you explain it to someone, it's like, I'm going to track how much time it takes me to do all of these things. It sounds a little crazy and OCD and like I'm working in a factory of my own design, but which is all true. But what it allows me to do is have a better understanding of how long things take. Like to go back to the YouTube example, when I first started doing YouTube, I really thought it would only take me a couple of hours each week to do a video of like the particular type of quality that I aspired to. But as I worked on getting videos to that level of quality, I realized it was taking me 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. It's like, because I tracked that time, now I, again, can have that conversation with myself. Like, well, do I have 8 hours a week to dedicate to this type of video?
Right.
At that time I could, but I had to change some things around and be like,
But you also have to know the rest of your schedule, like you were saying.
I wasn't doing a newsletter at that time.
Right.
I also only had one kid, which at this point, I have three kids. Having one kid almost feels like having no kids.
Yeah.
But
in retrospect, not in the moment, but looking back, it does.
yeah, in retrospect, I was, No, it felt like a lot, certainly. But I don't time track every single moment of every single day, but I have noticed that whenever I start to get into that, like that understanding or that feeling of like, oh man, I wonder like what am I doing all day? Like, where does the time go?
Yeah.
That's the question. That's the $1 million question. Where does the time go, right?
I just start to track.
My business partner's been trying to get me to track time for so long, and I just can't do it. I fully believe in time blocking, and I see the value in time tracking. But man, I don't know. It's something about my personality. I can't get myself to do that. But what I loved about the gap,
it's not for everyone.
I loved about the gap is the goals and the actions. I think those are two things that are talked about a lot in the productivity space. The protection piece of it was what I think is a little bit different, a new element that you don't hear talked about as much from that angle. So I kind of like that the new way that you're coming at that, and the protection and protecting our time. There's so many millions of things pulling at our time all day, every day. And if you're not a little protective of your time, you'll get sucked and pulled in all these millions of different directions. So I really like that aspect of your 3-part system. So let's take a look at your journey, Matt. When we were checking you out, it looked like you started mattragland.com in 2012, somewhere around there. What was your thought process when you said, let me go get this domain for my name? And what was the plan at the very beginning?
I did want to protect my domain name, my literal domain name. There's a great musician out of Austin, Texas, who's also named Matt Ragland, that anytime he says like he has music, people find me. And there's probably a lot. I would like to think at some point people email him asking about productivity or email marketing advice, and he's like, no. It's like people ask me,
they may
like,
already
hey,
be doing that.
Where's your tour? I was like, well, I'm like, just kidding. You're looking for this Matt Ragland. So I definitely wanted to grab my name, and beyond that, this was the blogging heyday in 2012, 2013. And so I was reading sites like Copyblogger and ProBlogger. A friend of mine, his name is Jeff Goins, who's like my first friend on the internet, and we're still good buddies. I love that guy. Did some guest posting, and this was really a time when ads were really popular. I mean, they still are, but like Google ads on sites, and like you just tried to get as much traffic to your website as you could so that you could monetize on the back end through Google ads, Amazon ads, whatever it is. Affiliates were really big then. And again, like all these things still are, but those were the two main pieces. People were selling ebooks, and there were some online courses, but like ads, affiliates, and ebooks were like the three primary strategies that I saw for people to monetize. So I just started trying to write as much as I could and to build a following.
So were you already kind of a writer or aspiring writer at this time?
Aspiring is very accurate. I did write a good bit through high school and college. It was always a hobby of mine. Like I did it. I set up a Blogger account and wrote some like for some college organizations that I was in. So I started blogging in, I guess it was probably 2005 officially. There's like for those types of posts, but
so long before mattragland.com was even created and launched, you had already been blogging up a storm.
Random blogger posts. Yeah.
Nice. So you're already an aspiring writer. You've been blogging since 2005. You got the Matt Ragland locked in before the other Matt Ragland even probably knew that you could get your name in a domain the way you did, and sucker. And then so now you have mattragland.com. You're this writer, you're blogging, And what are you writing? Are you writing about productivity at that time? Was that the type of writing that you were engaged in, or was it all different topics, or what did that look like?
It was all different topics, which was kind of an earlier, I wouldn't necessarily say a mistake, because I do think you have to get your reps in when it comes to writing and really any kind of creative work. So I'm grateful that I stayed motivated enough to keep writing, but it really was pretty all over the place. Now, the first domain that I purchased that wasn't my name was Life Prioritized. So I've always been thinking about, how do I prioritize the things that are most important in my life? And all of my productivity writing since then really is kind of downstream from that question. How do I make the most of the resources that I have, of the talents that I have, of the opportunities that I have, and the relationships? How do I prioritize those in an effective way so I'm getting the most out of everything? So I was writing about productivity and prioritization, and like life lessons, as much life lessons as a 30-year-old with no kids can talk about at the time. But I was very interested in online marketing. So I wrote a lot about marketing. I wrote about leadership, because I had been in some leadership roles at that point and was reading a lot about it, sharing what I read. I signed up for Twitter in 2008. So I was pretty early on that, but I really didn't start using it consistently or effectively until I'd say like 2019, 2020. So I just kind of like was there. But looking back, like that would have been a better, Twitter was different 10 years ago.
Right.
So when did you start to gain some traction? When and where with your content?
Yeah, the first time I had a big article hit was Lifehacker, which again, like 10, 11 years ago, it's still a huge site, but like to get on the front page of Lifehacker was monstrous. And I got like over 1,000 email subscribers and tons of like blog followers off this post that I did about personal fitness that I had co-written with my wife. And that was our first online business, actually, was fitness routines, body weight, at-home fitness routines. It was called The Simple Gym. And I really liked that business, but it needed to be something at the time that was more driven by her. And she went to nursing school and then had our first child. So it wasn't as much of a priority for her. But personally, I started to get more traction when I started to post on YouTube. And so I started posting on YouTube consistently in spring of 2018. And in 2018, I think I posted 70 videos to YouTube during that year. And I think it was my 67th video or something like that. It was my 56th video, I think, that went over 1,000 views. So I did over 50 videos before one hit 1,000 views. And then I did over 60 videos before I went over 1,000 subscribers. And then, so it was nearly a year and 70 videos before I hit 1,000 subscribers. And then I went from 1,000 subscribers to 10,000 subscribers in 6 months and another like 20 videos. So it really started to snowball at that point. And because of my experience at that time, I had been working at ConvertKit for 3 years. And so I had been talking about my newsletter and sharing lead magnets. And so my email list started growing. YouTube kept growing. And I stayed consistent with YouTube about every week for the next 3 years through 2021. I was like on about a weekly basis. So I have over 200 videos on YouTube, nearly 70,000 subscribers there, and have focused more on writing for the past year and a half. Mainly, again, like that kind of goes back to how much time do I have? And writing is easier to do.
And what did you figure out towards the end of that first year where you started to, I think you said it was your 57th video, where now you got over 1,000 views on your first video? Like, what was there something there that you kind of had an epiphany or figured out?
Yeah, I did. So there's actually a video up on the channel called like My Journey to 10,000 Subscribers. And what I noticed towards the end of that year is when you post a lot of work online, you have data to look at and say, this is what worked. And so through those first 50 videos, basically I looked at them and there was one that was clearly outperforming the rest. It was how I use a bullet journal to be productive, basically. And if you're listening, you're not familiar with the bullet journal, it's a notebook and you make a bunch of dashes and lines in it. That's a very simplistic way of explaining it. It's much more than that, but it is an effective, mindful, like, productivity system that I encourage everyone to check out. And that's what I built the majority. That's the main topic that I built the majority of my channel on. We'll talk about that in a sec. But I noticed that pretty much every video that I had published up to that point had gotten 200 or 300 views. So if you're asking, I know you're not asking this, but if you're listening and you're thinking like, okay, how can Matt help me get my first set of videos like over 1,000 or close to 10,000 views? I'm not sure. I have a better idea than I did at that time, but I did not go viral quickly, and I did not grow quickly. And it kind of goes back to how I was creating content even like 5 years before. At that point, I was trying to be consistent, get my reps in, and see in the aggregate what stood out, like what rose to the top. And it was that bullet journal productivity video. So I decided to make here's how I'm planning the new year. Here's how I'm planning 2019 in a bullet journal. Like, here's how I'm setting up. So I use the bullet journal as a Trojan horse to talk about productivity. And eventually I use productivity as a way to talk about how to live a fulfilled life. So everything, like, that's the through line that I've realized about the work that I've done, especially from a content perspective, is not giving reminders to myself, but also guidance and advice for here's how you can prioritize, understand, and like focus on the things that matter to you. And one of the best ways that I've found to do that is through productivity strategies.
Right. I wanted to sort of go back and lean a little bit more into where we started this whole conversation on actionable items for aspiring entrepreneurs that aren't exactly sure where they're going. I like how you broke it down, to sort of macro and then more micro things. But I was curious if you could expand a little bit more on sort of the entrepreneur who wants the change but doesn't know what the change is. Can you talk through, I think one of the videos I was watching, you were just talking about how to sort your goals and how to really sort of figure out where you end up, where you want to end up, and sort of how to get there. Can you talk us through that process?
Yeah. I think that first, and this probably isn't an answer that I would have given a year or two ago, but if you're not sure where you want to go, then I really would spend some time thinking about that. Because while there is value in action, and the answer that I would have given, and we'll share a couple of years ago, is if you take action in the direction of what you think your goals might be, you will gain clarity through that action. So you'll understand it better as you move towards it. But a lot of people, myself included, spend a lot of time going in a direction that they're not sure about just because they're like, well, everyone tells me I need to do something, so I'll start doing something. But it's like the difference. You'll see illustrations like lots of little squiggly lines. Like Jack Butcher, actually, Visualize Value on Twitter X. Mm-hmm. He's got like some great visual posts about this. Like, you can go a million different directions, but not make very much progress. Right. Whereas if you have a better idea of the direction that you want to go, you can make a lot more progress with ironically less effort. So this is the paradox of the moment that your listeners are probably in, is it's worth taking time to clarify where you want to go, but it's not worth spending too much time procrastinating to the point of, well, I'm not 100% sure if this is it. If you have
analysis paralysis.
Exactly. If you have a good idea and you have a pretty clear direction, then that is worth pursuing. So I don't anymore recommend like just action for action's sake, but at the same time, the greater danger is analysis paralysis, thinking, okay, well, I'm not 100% sure.
Right.
Like you should have a pretty good feeling. So that was like a little bit more like high-minded. So let's come back down to like the actionable strategy of it.
That's a great way of covering it. Here's the general, and now how are you going to actually implement these concepts to improve your life? I love those.
Yeah. So it does kind of go back to what I would do, and especially like ranking. So when I was working at startups, there's a growth function called the ICE score. And what that stands for is impact, confidence, and ease. And it's a way of ranking different growth experiments. You could do this for anything, but I like switched it around to like consider goals that I was interested in pursuing. Because you can't do, even if you have some clarity, you still have to like prioritize and rank the things that you believe are good to do. So impact, confidence, and ease. On a scale of 1 to 10, what if you took three goals that you had, rank them and say, which one of these, if it succeeds, is going to have the most impact on my life or on my business or on my family? What is the confidence that I have that this will actually work out, which is very subjective. A lot of these are subjective in the early days. I'll come back to that in a second. And then the third one, the ease, how easy, or what kind of, you can also think of it as time. So sometimes like iced tea, like the rapper. What is the time that it will most likely take for this to like, just for it to be completed enough that I can make it like a final analysis on it.
Got it. Okay.
So you put those together, and whichever one has the highest like score, then you go for that. And like I said, this is until you have run a lot of these experiments and pursued and completed and achieved a lot of goals. One, this is still going to feel very subjective. And two, you're not going to know what will have the most impact. Like you might have a general idea. Like if I run like from an entrepreneur perspective, if I complete a course, an online course that I could sell and it does well, then that's a pretty high impact.
Right.
But how confident am I that it's going to do well? How easy is it going to be for me to complete it? Versus, well, what if I put all that time into like growing my audience on Twitter or my newsletter, or like getting more guests on the podcast? What's the impact of that? And those could all be separate goals as well. So you go through that and you just look and say, okay, this like growing my audience on Twitter is like has the highest score. It will have a big impact. I'm confident that I can like do this, and it's not easy, of course, but it might be easier than putting an online course together. So that's the way that you would do it. And then like put that into the gap method. Like, what is my goal? My goal is to like be consistent on Twitter, to come up with like 50 posts a month that I can do on Twitter. Okay, if I'm going to do that, that's my goal, is to post 10 to 15 times a week. If that's my goal, what are the actions that I need to do? When do I need to protect time to like, and I can batch that stuff together, but when do I need to protect time to research, to write, and to schedule? And one other thing to add, and this is kind of related to like time blocking, protection, time tracking, is there's a like kind of time versus task methodology that I learned about in like my sports science, sports management days. called task versus time. It's also popular in a different frame in like CrossFit, where you look at it and say, like, for this workout, or let's just say for running, you can either say, I have 30 minutes to run. And so I'm going to run as far as I can in 30 minutes, but at 30 minutes, I'm done. Or you can say, I need to run 3 miles, or I need to do 100 push-ups. So no matter how long it takes for me to run 3 miles or do 100 push-ups, that's the task-based outcome. A time-based outcome is say, I'm going to do as much as I can in 30 minutes.
Right.
And for something like, let's say, writing, a lot of times what you hear is more of a task-based outcome. Write 1,000 words.
Interesting.
Write 50 tweets, 50 posts. Instead, I could look at it and say, I have 30 minutes to write. I have an hour to write. And I'm just going to get as many words in during that time as I can. Some days it might be 300, some days it might be 1,000. And you can approach your gap, the protected time in your gap, from that perspective. And again, like sometimes you'll be more task oriented, some days you might be more time oriented, but just setting that intention, it'll also help inform it. You know, Doug, I know you said that time tracking, time blocking isn't really for you. Time blocking, in a sense, like protecting that time, is like a backdoor way of time tracking, because that's how I started with YouTube as well. I would look at it and say, I have 2 hours to work on this YouTube video. Ah, crap. I am not done after 2 hours.
Right.
So that either means that, you know, next week I have 2 more hours and then I'll be done. So then I get to look at it and say, like, okay, this video takes me 4 hours. Can I create 4 hours in a week so that I can do that one video? Is there like a halfway version of that video that I could actually do in 2 hours if I wasn't as persnickety about editing, which was rarely the case? Or could I just make a shorter video with the same type of OCD editing? Maybe that's an option. But when you kind of understand, like, the way that I want to do this video is 4 hours, is there a different way of doing the video that could only be 2 hours? Or am I just going to post every other week with this type of video?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to make adjustments if you're not measuring the time,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Because until you've done that, it's really difficult to say this is going to take me X amount of time until you've done it many, many times. Or if you're doing the time tracking, maybe you can more quickly figure out how long this takes.
Matt, it sounds like a lot of the starter work that you did was kind of a side hustle while you were still working at one of the startups. A lot of our audience sort of starts that way also, mostly because of the risk mitigation factor, saying like, well, I still have my 9-to-5 job. I still have income.
Absolutely.
Once this side thing takes off, I can do it. Can you talk us through sort of the way that you recommend making that time the most productive, and also sort of really finding what side hustle it is that you think might be potentially the escape route?
Yeah, a lot of it goes into that time blocking as well. And so like I do recommend, if you're going to side hustle, and I recommend usually a very audience-based approach. And so build an audience. Now, that's not saying you have to have like 10,000 or 100,000 followers or subscribers. If you have a very like focused niche or set of skills or specific offer that you can share with people, then, you know, if you have, say, $1,000 service or a $500 service, well, if you had like 1 client, 2 clients at $500,000 a month, that's 5 years ago, that did sound high to me. Now that sounds like it's going to sound pretentious now, but like I would barely respond to an email for less than $1,000 for like a service product. Like, I mean, I will, if you email me, I will reply, but I almost never take on any kind of work for less than $1,000. And 5 years ago, it would have been like $1,000. Oh my gosh. So like, there's a progression to these things, but start to build an audience, or at least like a platform where you're saying, this is what I do, this is how I help, and delivering value that way. And protect time for the like audience building, content marketing that you'll do that's focused on your niche or your service or your side hustle. So protect time to talk about it, and then protect time to like work on it, to do client work over it. Because I think
I love
that
that.
service work, client work is the fastest way to monetization, more so than, is you'll find that it's much easier to find one person to pay you $1,000 for a project than it is to find 10 people that will pay you $100 for your digital course. Unless you're somebody who like might already have some kind of sway, but I'm guessing, like, no offense, probably most people listening are not in that position. Most people are not, like, where
Right.
it's like, oh, well, I already had this leadership position and I'm just going to like go onto LinkedIn and start posting, and people are like, oh, well, this person's awesome, so I'm going to follow them. And oh yeah, sure, they were CEO or VP at such and such. And, if you are, right on, you're further ahead. But that's not the place that I was in. And what I started doing for monetization was service work for like email marketing and course development. And then I started doing some personal coaching, productivity coaching as well. And, for me, I, do, well on courses, but the majority of my revenue still like comes from service work and from coaching.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what the breakdown on that. What was the point that you knew that the side hustle was no longer just a side hustle? Was there sort of a specific moment that you look back on and like, I don't think I need to keep this gig that I was the number 5 employee at anymore?
Yeah. I had been planning for it I had been subconsciously planning for it at least a couple of years before I started intentionally planning for it, for about 6 months. So we had like intentionally started saving some more. And then I was working on my side hustles more. So I had gone up from like, basically like 5 to 8 hours. So like most mornings or evenings, I was getting an hour-ish of work. And so I'd say like 5 to 7 hours per week. That went up to like 10 to 15 hours for a 6-month stretch. And that was basically saying like,
really doubled down on it.
Yeah, I doubled down on it. I basically was working, this was over a summer, that I was like really dialed in. I was working most of Saturday on it, in addition to that time. And so I focused on my monetization more and started saving. And that year, I had hit about 50% through side hustle revenue of what my salary was at that time. So to me, basically, I had saved up about 6 months of runway at that point. And I was like, okay, 6 months, I can then go another, gives me a 6-month head start. And that was really helpful. But it also comes down to like making the decision came down to those priorities again. It's like, for me to keep doing this at the level that I want to, I either have to keep working weekends, basically, which lowers, very much lowers the priority of my family and my friends at that point.
Right.
And I had already been doing that for several months as we kind of built up. And I was no longer, it was either between side hustle, family, and career, and like regular job at that point. And I decided that from a priority perspective, certainly I couldn't work anymore / sleep any less working on the side hustle. And I also couldn't take any more time away from my family and friends that I already was. And so it kind of became clear, and I had saved up. So I had a bit of a runway. I was like, this is the time to make the jump.
So you had wife's income as well at the time?
At the time, she was working part-time. Now she is at home with our boys now, which is amazing. And like she and we are both really excited about that. But not a full-time income on her end.
I'm just trying to go to the headspace of where you're at during that time when you made that decision, because you said prioritizing, you got day job, you got the side hustle that's growing, and then family. And I love how intentional you are. I feel like everything that I'm hearing is just, there's so much intentionality and prioritization happening as you're making these big decisions. So like with your family, a lot of people are like, okay, I got wife and I got a kid or two. And that makes the decision more scary, I think, for a lot of people. And the way you're describing it for you, your thought process was, well, if I stay with my job, then I'm taking away time from my family. So I got this runway, 6 months. And I guess that probably increased your confidence iced tea score a little bit, having a little bit of runway. And so was there a little bit of that fear alongside the wanting to prioritize your family, or did you feel very confident just based in the fact that you had the runway and the side hustle looked like it was getting traction?
Yeah, it depended on the day. Sometimes I did feel confident because I had a track record at that point, and I, had the runway. I had 6 months. I think I could have done it with less. I think I would have felt more comfortable if it was more, to be honest.
Right.
And but there were definitely, I came out the gate and had a really good launch in like the first couple of months that I went full time on my own. So I was feeling awesome in Q1 of 2021. But then like Q2 and even into Q3 were not as awesome. And so by the end of the year, I was feeling much more stress. Like I'd kind of not quite hit the end of my runway, but it was like in the distance. And so I think like one of the other things about this, and especially like as you're building a side hustle and you're thinking about how to monetize and how to build revenue streams, is being flexible and developing multiple revenue streams so that you can shift and make money different ways without feeling like you're hitting up your same list, your same audience for the same thing over and over again, starting to like feel or look desperate. Because that's not a good position to be in. But the first 9 months of 2021 of being full-time creator, not being side hustle guy anymore, that was pretty much all digital products. And then I had a launch, I think like in August or September, that did not go very well. And I was like, I need to do something. I need to do something else.
So now you're in month 8, month 9 of the new the full-time business. Yeah.
And at this point, my wife was still working part-time, but she wasn't working very much. And she was like, in a loving way, she was like, figure it out. And I was like, yep, got it. I'm going to. And that's when I went back to service work at that point. And I did about as much revenue in those last 4 months on services and coaching and consulting as I did in the first 8 months with digital products. And so I've kind of kept that balance going forward. I like working with people. I have high value, high ticket knowledge when it comes to all of these things. And that's where I've found my best balance. Yeah. I've continued to work on some digital products, but just having that flexibility and also that, kind of going back to that honesty of like, hey, if you if you want to keep doing this, it can't always be like, hey, I've got this funnel that I just plug people into and that's where the money comes in and all I have to do is this one thing. I know a lot of people that do that. It's definitely very, very possible. And there are things that I'm always working on to improve. But like for me, service work, agency work, consulting, that's been like my primary strategy. And that started in Q4 of 2021.
Yeah, I love that recommendation of having multiple streams so you don't feel like, oh man, this one option is not working out. And then that desperation can turn into killing your one option, or you can, think like, man, what other options do I have out there? I think that's really good advice. One of the questions that we ask for every guest is, how would you personally define entrepreneurship?
It's a good question. For me, I've defined it as, and this isn't, for me, I've defined it as freedom and flexibility. and the ability to do the things overall that matter the most to me, that I'm most interested in, and create the kind of life for my family that allows us to be at our freest and most flexible.
Yes, I love
Now,
that.
that being said, to me, yeah, entrepreneurship has also meant that there are lots of commitments, and there are lots of late nights and early mornings and weekends that I still work, but I'm always reminding myself that this is the type of work that I chose, that I decided to do. I think, entrepreneurship is responsibility also, that it's a responsibility to either the customers that you have, the clients that you have, or the decision that you've made for yourself in the past. And I keep coming back to, like, this is the type of thing that I want to be doing, and I have the freedom to choose that. I have the freedom to continue choosing that. It's because of those decisions that, to be completely honest, like I'm probably not making a huge amount more money than I was that last year of working at the startup.
Right.
I'm not at $500,000, $500,000 chill dollars every year.
Yeah, it's the freedom that you have from what you're currently doing. It's not really the money you were chasing.
Yeah, and it's the ownership too. Like, I know that for better or for worse, and a lot of days it feels better, some days it feels worse. I own the outcome, and I own the future, and I have a responsibility to that past, present, and future version of myself, and for my family as well.
I love that. Was there one piece of advice either early on or through your podcast that you heard that really stayed with you? And it's specifically for our audience of aspiring entrepreneurs, was there one piece of advice that really stayed with you that you think, man, I'm never going to forget this, and I think that it's really important that people hear this?
A few things that come to mind. One is consistency has always been key. So as long as when you keep showing up and you keep showing people that you care, that you have something to say, that you have something that will help them, that will always pay off. The second piece of advice is to usually monetize much sooner than you think. Now, that doesn't mean you have to have some big launch within 3 months, but going back to the service work, you should have something that people are able to give you money for, because it feels better to be paid than to not be paid when you're an entrepreneur. And then the third piece of it, and this is something honestly, I'm still learning myself, is making that jump from, oh, I'm just here and I'm going to be consistent, I'm going to show up, to I have a very defined, straightforward, repeatable position in the market. And I have a level of quality and delivery, something that people can expect from me, other than there's Matt on X again, talking on LinkedIn, whatever it is. That is that's the third piece of, whether it's advice or just a lesson learned that I'm still learning myself, is making that shift from okay, I'm here. People know I'm here, but how do you establish yourself as one of the key people in your market? That's the next thing.
That's a huge point. Building your brand and building your reputation and doing it from the very beginning. Because I think when you're first getting started, you're small, you're kind of operating in obscurity, but you want to start as early as possible, realizing that everyone that you come into contact with, everyone that you're engaging with, everyone that is seeing what you're doing, they need to know what they can expect, and that what they can expect is something great every time, consistently. So that's a really strong point. The other thing I liked earlier, Jonathan already kind of gave you props on this one, but yeah, not putting all your eggs in one basket, having multiple streams of income, because it's so easy, I think, when you're starting out your own business to be so laser focused on the one thing, and I got to bring this idea to the world and into reality. And then when it's not working as well, or it's taking longer than you hoped or thought it would, you want to have that second and third option that you can kind of fall back on in the meantime to give yourself some more runway and extend that out. So there are a lot of people in this audience who are not happy. They're sitting in the cubicle. We've been there, and it can be tough, and they want bigger things for themselves and their families and their careers, and they're scared, and they want to kind of be out there doing what the three of us are doing. What parting advice do you have for those aspiring entrepreneurs who are starting out on their own journey?
Get started. Make a list of the things that you want to do, the things that you want to have, the goals that you set in front of yourself. Make a sub list on each of those things about what you know right now are actions that you can take to achieve those goals. And then protect an hour, 2 hours every week to then work on the one that, we talked about ranking, but work on the one that sounds the most exciting or the easiest for you to do. Because we want to lower friction for you as quickly as possible, so that you just keep getting those reps and keep building that confidence early on. And then as you do that, I would also say share those things online as quickly as you can, no matter what social platform you feel best about sharing on. Start an email list, have a service or some kind of offer, build in that sequence, define what you want, take action on it, share it with others, and then eventually have something that you can sell. And then that's a very, very simple flywheel. And I know the third thing that I said a moment ago was be really great at it, but don't worry about being great until you can be consistent, and the confidence will come.
I love that. It's so funny because it sounds so simple. Just write it down and write your goals, and then write some of the actions that would get you to that goal. It's such a simple thing, but I think that people would be shocked when they actually get down and do that, how that can get them started on the path. Because so many times I'll have people talk to me, 1 month and say I don't like what I'm doing. I want to do this other thing. And I'll be yeah, you should probably write down some ideas on how you can do that, or people you should talk to about how you could get to that point. And then I'll see them a few weeks later, a few months later, and they'll be yeah, I'm even more frustrated now. And it's well, what did you write down? Have you done any of those things? And it's no, I don't need to write it down. I know what I need to do, but let's just write it down.
Put it on paper.
Yeah. That's a way of holding yourself accountable. Yeah. I love that. It's so simple.
I have sticky notes all over this place of when I leaving the door to my office, there's a list of a lot of what I do right now with the agency is sales. And I just have a list of all the deals that I'm trying to close. And then over there, it's these are the other goals that I have for life. And it's just, I see them multiple times a day.
I love that. It's so simple, but it's so crucial to take that first step. And that first step is knowing where you're going. I think that's awesome. Matt, thanks so much for sharing your path. We all have such different paths to finding our own freedom. And I love how you use that in your definition of entrepreneurship, because that's a really common word, that comes with entrepreneurship. It's a lot of hard work, but the freedom that it can give you is so impactful on your lives. So I appreciate you sharing your story. I think our audience is going to love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Doug. It was a pleasure.
This is great. Thanks so much, Matt.
Yeah, Matt, people are going to want to reach out to you. What's the best way for them to reach out to you or find you?
Yeah, just go to mattragland.com. You can sign up for my productivity email list there. You can also follow me at Matt Ragland on Twitter X and LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram, but that's more family, fitness, travel.
Yeah, that's your nature page. I like that.
Yeah, it's just my nature page. There's mountains and stuff. I love it. But that's more of a personal thing, but it's public. You can follow me there too. But Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube as well. And I'm getting ready to restart my YouTube channel. So that'll be exciting.
Yeah, there's so much good stuff on that YouTube page. I highly recommend that. Thanks so much, Matt. This was an awesome one. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Matt.
Yo. Welcome to Find Your Freedom, the best entrepreneurship podcast. Being an entrepreneur is hard. That's why we created findyourfreedompod.com to compile all the resources you need to find your own freedom.